Hello and welcome back to the Now We Know Show, the show where we discuss a topic of interest and by the end we will have learnt something new and hopefully you will too. I'm Zach.
And I'm Buzz. And it's October!
Yay!
Yay!
Or should we say Shocktober?
Shocktober, that's a good one, Zach. So what we are looking at is everything to do with Halloween, or All Hallows Eve. And we're doing a consecutive set of 4 podcasts this month, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Leading up to Halloween itself.
All things scary.
Scary. Everything from the other side, or whatever. So anyway, what we're doing in this particular podcast is we've already in a previous podcast covered the mythology of zombies.
We have.
So in October, we're looking at 2 other most popular creepy creatures of mythology that everybody loves.
What could they be?
Well, this week, in this episode, we're looking and talking and discussing about the mythology of vampires.
If you enjoy the Now We Know Show podcast, why not support Zak Wylde Productions on our Patreon page? Become an official ZWP patron for as little as £1 a month for exclusive early access to all our latest episodes, videos, behind the scenes, updates and more.
So to help us discover everything about the mythology of vampires, what are vampires, where do they come from, everything we need to know about vampires that hopefully we can think of.
We've brought in an expert.
We have, and our expert with us today is, put your hands together for Sarah Downing, vampire expert extraordinaire.
Yeah.
Hello, Sarah.
Hi, how are you guys?
Oh, we're fine. We're rocking.
I'm pretty good. I'm quite sure that we've had Sarah on the podcast before.
Actually, I think you're right.
Really?
Yes. I think Sarah is our first
Returning
guest.
guests.
Yeah. So you are a returning guest.
How does it feel?
Awesome.
Back in the dungeon studio, which is quite apt since it's Halloween month.
Wah.
Wahahaha. Do you want to go do a mwahahaha?
I'm no good at
So anyway, Sarah, you've studied and researched vampires for a long time. In fact, you're, as people may recall, you're an author, and actually, I think you're actually writing a story about vampires at the moment.
am.
So you are well schooled in the mythology of vampirism.
Oh, I'm really intrigued about this.
What, actually being a vampire?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Why not? So where should we start? I suppose we need to start where everything starts, and that's at the very beginning. So, Sarah, where do we get vampirism and vampires from? Yeah, where are the earliest kind of beginnings of this mythology?
A lot of the folklore is unsurprisingly sort of Eastern European. Not necessarily Transylvania, but sort of Croatia and Poland. When England had witch trials, there were vampire trials going on in Europe.
Oh, yes.
Ooh.
There was a village, can't remember the date off the top of my head, but 17 villagers had died in 3 months.
17 villagers?
Yeah.
And this is in France, do you say? Or just...
It's sort of more to the east, I think. Anyway, someone from Austria went over to check. He was an army surgeon and couldn't find any disease or anything that would explain why these people died. The locals thought it was the dead previously that were killing off the other villagers.
So we got the
vampires.
The living dead, not zombies, but actual vampires.
Yeah, and
Is this vampirism? Are we talking about what we would assume the modern day idea of vampire is, with these living dead creatures coming back and literally draining? Because you get, am I right or wrong? You get some vampires which you think of drinking blood, and you get vampires that drink people's energy.
Yeah, the energy drinking vampires come more from sort of succubus mythology.
We just wanted you to say succubus, didn't we?
That's a weird
No,
word.
say it again.
Succubus.
Well, succubus. Wait, say it, Zach.
I don't want to.
Okay, so we got all these villagers, and they're all mysteriously dying.
Yeah, and local villagers are blaming people that have died previously. they convinced the guy to exhume some bodies and examine them, and I don't know what he saw, but his report back to the Austrian government was to let the villagers continue staking the dead.
Right. Okay.
It obviously freaked him out.
Okay.
Ooh.
So, from a modern perspective, has anybody looked back at that incident and sort of seen that perhaps it was some other reason for this, but because they didn't have the medical understanding, that's why they put it
Yeah,
down
I'm
to...
not sure they'd still be able to test for any sort of the diseases that might still be that would have killed them. I suppose.
But sometimes you
Must
get
be
written reports of things that might have certain telltale descriptions in that might lead you to think that maybe somebody was high on some kind of something or other, because you get
mushrooms.
You get mushrooms. You get what's the thing you have on wheat? Ergot.
Ergot poisoning,
Yeah,
which
things
was
like that.
behind the Salem witch trials.
Maybe we should have done witches as well.
Maybe next time.
Next time.
It would tie in very nicely with werewolves and vampires.
Right. Okay.
But I will get to that.
You're trying to come back in, aren't you?
She was third time in the studio. Can't keep her away.
Yeah, because the other name for vampire, Nosferatu, actually means plague carrier.
Plague carrier, right.
So at the time you had the vampire trials going on in Europe, in France and that you had werewolf trials going on,
Okay.
and in England you had witch trials.
witch trials.
So many trials.
So many trials.
But
And
around
then
that time there's
in
also...
Badminton, they had the horse trials.
What?
There wasn't that's an equestrian joke. There.
On to vampires.
Yeah, back to vampires.
So around the time that all this was going on, there were outbreaks of typhoid, plague,
As in,
smallpox.
when you say plague, you're talking about the Black Death.
Yeah, which was thought to be behind sort of
Oh, right, being spread
vampire.
by vampires.
yes. But in the folklore,
Yeah.
it's very, very easy to become a
I
vampire.
was going to say, I don't want to be all covered in pustules because I've been vamped.
Yeah, actually, the studio could probably do with being a bit bigger because one of the signs of a vampire was red hair and blue eyes.
Wait. Oh dear.
Oh, dear.
Yes, and I'm trapped in the studio with two of
I
you.
was thinking that light was a bit bright.
Yes, I mean, that's why we always hide from the day star, isn't it, Zach? Yeah, now we've invited our lunch, or is it? No, look at the time, dinner into the studio.
Yeah, we don't really tan, we just burn.
We just burn, yeah.
Yes. Actually, that's a Hollywood creation. The vampires bursting into dust in
we'll
sunlight.
we'll return to that later on in the podcast, I think. So anyway, so we've got all these villagers, and they're all dying from what they believe is some kind of supernatural thing from their dead relatives coming back and having at them. So we've got all these trials going on, yeah.
Yep. They were exhuming bodies, staking them, stuffing their mouths full of garlic, and chopping their heads off.
Ah.
Or burning the bodies as well and sort of scattering the ashes
So
over
kind of
running water.
why would they initially go for garlic? Because I mean, obviously you mentioned briefly about sunlight, but obviously you're talking about an actual historic period in time. So what did they see that garlic did, or what was the specific?
It was more because it was really strong smelling. Like during the Black
Hang on a
Death.
second. Are we talking about? We're back in. Was it France that was having the?
France had some werewolf trials as well.
All right, I
sort of
was going to say, 'cause we
Poland
know
is
that the
the-
French like the garlic. You see, 'cause it's pretty handy. Stuff their mouth full of garlic. You know?
Yeah, you know the plague doctors, with the masks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like.
Well,
that
you
with
had for those people who maybe, for the listeners, you get the plague doctor masks. They kind of look like a crow, don't they?
Yeah.
Sort of a corvid kind of mask with the two eyes. But that was actually designed for stuffing scented things in the front of it,
Yes.
wasn't it? So
Yeah, because it was thought that sort of bad air caused disease. So
Caused
because
disease.
garlic was quite strong smelling.
So, oh, goodness me, you could walk around with a beak full of garlic.
Oh.
A beak full of garlic and lavender. Wonder if they did that, lavender and garlic. So anyway, so they stuffed all these people's mouths full of garlic and then staked them.
Staked them, and some of the other ones would chop the head off, burn the body, scatter the ashes over running water. Cause
And the running water, we're going to go to the running water later on. Yeah, it tweaked your interest, that did, the running water.
I love how many different ways you can kill vampires.
Yeah, we'll revise this as we go along.
But back in the folklore, like I say, it was considered very easy to become a vampire. People with red hair, blue eyes, which I mentioned, things like an animal like a dog jumping over the grave after burial was thought to bring that person back as a vampire.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Not having proper burial rites. Yeah, anything that sort of would result in sort of excommunication, being buried on unhallowed ground, and dying in childbirth.
Oh, would make you a vampire?
Yes.
Oh, dear.
It was thought they'd come back and either feed on the babies, or sort of try and rear the child and sort of kill it. But
that's quite dark.
That is quite dark. So,
what about being bitten by a vampire?
That's another Hollywood.
Oh,
that's again, we'll return to that later on. We're going to start, before we get into that kind of Hollywood zone of vampires, I want to focus really on that ancient mythology. So, talking about, obviously, it being a European thing in general, is there anywhere else in the world that vampires are found? Because I again, you're the expert, but I believe that they have vampirism in Japan. Maybe in China, that there's things.
All I can say is I've seen a lot of films.
But you are the movie buff. But I just wondered if in other cultures around the world, whether they have their own kind of. Because we discovered in the zombie one that really the mythology of zombies and the living dead from the zombie perspective is very much a worldwide belief, in lots of different cultures. I just wondered if you'd heard or found any research to do with vampirism.
The only other one I've come across is, I can't remember the name of the god, he's an Aztec god, which they used to do blood sacrifices to. It looked a bit like a vampire bat,
right?
But there wasn't really any sort of actual vampires in their mythology.
Okay, because the Aztecs used to do ridiculous things like literally cut the hearts out of 4,000 people just when it rained. So it rained,
Yes, well, the whole point of the Aztecs of them slaughtering people was that they thought that the dead person, by sort of with the blood and sort of burning of the body, that person would then act as a messenger to the gods to say, "Hey, we need rain."
Oh, that's nice. Send another one. No, it's still not raining. Send another one. Oh, my goodness me. So with all this kind of folklore in Europe, so let's focus on European vampirism. Is there any particular kind of definition of what is a vampire?
Well, it was sort of someone that come back from the dead. They would feed on the blood of their victims. Mm-hmm. The earliest vampires used to have pointed tongues, which they used to use to pierce the body of the person they were feeding from rather than teeth.
Ooh,
all right, that's an interesting. I've never heard of that. So would that be kind of almost like a reptilian tongue type of thing, or just literally like a
It reminds me of something from Doctor Who, actually.
Oh, yes. What was that one then?
That's from Time and the Rani with the Tetraps.
All right.
Do you remember those? The big bat people?
Oh, yeah, I do. 3 eyes.
No, 4 eyes. One on each side.
Oh, right. And one on the back.
Yep.
Okay, 4.
Anyway.
4 eyes.
They've got the tongues. Bat. They've got the tongues.
Yeah, they come out and zap you, do they?
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay. Okay, fair enough. I think that's not really mythology, but it's a good point.
Cool.
It might have been based on mythology.
Could have done.
There was other vampires that were thought to start out like poltergeist, so you'd sort of hear all the knocking, and that would go on for 40 days. So
more of a spirit being?
Yeah, so rather than rising as sort of zombie-like body, it was the spirit body. Like I said, it'd be poltergeist.
Oh, right, so instead of the physical body climbing out of the grave, this is their spirit being has risen from the grave.
Yeah, and it would start with like poltergeist knocking, that would go on for 40 days. Then the spirit would have got enough energy to start drinking blood. The more blood it drank, the stronger it became.
Okay.
Eventually got a physical body, and then it would return to its normal life, go back to its family.
So when they are feeding on people, how would people, surely they'd be thinking that they're being fed upon because there is a mark or something left by the vampires? I mean, obviously our traditional view is the two teeth punctures.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if there were physical marks, but sort of they certainly feel weaker and
so
more tired.
If somebody's feeling lethargic for some reason, then
they've probably
that would be a
fed
case
on by
of
a vampire.
Case of vampire, which could be any kind of medical condition really that might suddenly be hitting somebody, even like a really bad case of influenza, where they're feeling completely drained or they've gone white, food poisoning, something like that.
Yeah. In fact, one of the thoughts on so one of the things that would turn somebody into a vampire was eating meat from a sheep that had been attacked by a wolf.
Right, so
It's very specific.
that is very specific. To be honest, I would have thought that would have been more like, oh, if you're doing that, it's more going to go down the lines of the werewolf rather than the vampire. But the vampire,
The other one is if someone was a werewolf and they died, they thought there would be a higher chance of them coming back as a vampire as well. So there's a lot of
I think I've read that. I think I've read that
werewolves and
somewhere.
vampires.
Right, we're going to have to cover that one in the werewolf podcast.
Oh yeah.
So werewolves becoming vampires, and in this case, vampires because of wolves biting sheep.
Yeah. Well, in some movies, I'm going back to movies again. You do see vampires turn into wolves.
Well, that is one of the questions I've got down here. Was that vampires in the mythology of vampires, and we see it in the movies quite a lot, and probably read it in books as well. But in the mythology of vampires, are they shapeshifters? Can they?
They
change
are.
into
They
different
usually take the shape of wolves in the original folk mythology.
things?
Them turning into bats was invented by Bram Stoker in Dracula, of course picked up by Hollywood when it was made into a film. In fact, the earliest film was in 1922.
Which was?
I think it was called Nosferatu.
Oh, that was the Nosferatu one. Yeah, I think we're all familiar
and
with Nosferatu.
that's the first one where vampires sort of crumbled into dust when they were exposed to sunlight as well.
Yeah, so there's that iconic black and white picture of Nosferatu being struck by the sunbeam. In fact, they are thinking about doing
another one.
A remake of Nosferatu.
By Jack's favourite director.
Yeah, and actor as well, isn't it? Who is meant to be William Dafoe, isn't it, being Nosferatu?
Yeah, well, I think Bill Skarsgård's now kind of signed on to be involved in it somehow.
Right, okay.
The guy who played It.
Oh,
the new one.
That one, right, okay. So that'd be interesting if they reboot Nosferatu.
I'd watch it. I really like The Northman.
So, The Northman. Have you seen that yet?
No,
You've
not
got to
yet.
watch anybody listening, watch The Northman. Really good. Anyway, back to the vampires. So in the mythology, they could change into wolves, but in Hollywood mythology, because that's what I'm going to pull upon, the good old Dracula movies with Bela Lugosi, etc. You used to get the creeping mist that would come under the door and then grow and grow and grow, and suddenly the mist would descend.
Yeah, or like a shadow. On
descend away, and suddenly they would. Yes, true. They'd either come out of the mist or step forward out of a shadow that has been produced on the wall. But so is that something they could do? And obviously there is the very much the movie trope of a vampire turning into a bat. So, how do they relate to the mythology compared to the kind of movies and books?
Certainly, Dracula turning into mist was in the Bram Stoker books.
Yep. And he was based on Vlad the Impaler.
Yes.
He wasn't an actual vampire, I take it.
No, he just had a fondness for staking people.
Staking people. So actually, that's quite kind of twist, because you think about how to kill a vampire, stake them, and then you've got a person that the most iconic vampire character is based on Dracula is actually somebody who just loved to go around staking people.
Yeah. There was a Hungarian countess as well, Elizabeth Bathory. She used to kill her servants and bathe in their blood to stay looking younger.
Ah, was that what Countess Dracula, the movie, was based on?
Yes.
Is it something to do with the name Carmilla or something? That's what I've
But I do
heard.
remember that, because she used to always get these. I think in the movie it might have been virgins, or I don't know, but she would always fill the bath with
I
blood
haven't
and
seen
bathe in
that
the blood.
particular film.
No?
No.
Countess Dracula. Oh, we're spoiling it for you now, aren't we?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, should have put a spoiler alert. Okay, so the mist is from the book.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did come across a mention of vampires turning into mist in the folklore, but I think again it's the more sort of vampires that are in spirit form rather than.
Right, so you got this kind of
physical.
ethereal spirit mist creeping around. I mean, you can imagine. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, if you throw yourself back, if you're somebody who lives in the city, I mean, you'd be lucky if you can see the stars at night if you live in a city, and you probably very rarely get mist unless you get in a smog or sometimes a fog. But if you live in the countryside, then you're far more familiar with the fact that we get these early morning mists that come rolling across the field, usually especially if you're around any kind of water body, if you've got a river or a lake near you, get those low-lying mists, which are so iconic on the old black and white type of horror movies,
Very
where
much so,
they're
yeah.
coming through the graveyard and the mist is swirling. And it kind of seems weird because you kind of think that wouldn't be the case. But if you get up early enough in the morning, you do get those mists. And so if you are a villager that is not, as we do, living life literally by the clock, because people didn't have clocks probably at the time that we're talking about these types of myths, Sarah. At some point, every village ended up having like a town clock that people worked to, but before that, people just used to get up when the cock crowed, and when the daylight broke in the morning. So it's more likely you're going to see these eerie mists and things, and they can be quite. They probably do. So, ooh, this is a bit creepy. This is.
Imagine the houses weren't sort of very well sealed either, so you'd probably get the mist sort of creeping into the house.
And if you combine that with somebody who almost falls ill overnight for some reason,
that could really freak you out.
Yeah, you could think that they have had a visitation from some kind of vampire because of this mist. Especially if you combined perhaps a recent death from somebody in the village or whatever, and then you happen to have a mist come down. And then somebody else falls ill in the house, and you're going to put all these perfectly innocent things together, and you could start seeing where this kind of mythology would spring from, It's fascinating. So we've got myths. What about the bats? Vampires turning into bats, and vampire bats.
Vampire bats are...
Because you're our bat specialist as well.
Yes, vampire bats are solely found in South America.
Mm-hmm. That's the vampire bat.
That's
the physical, real vampire bat is South America.
Yes.
If I recall, didn't you tell us that there are different types?
There are 3 different species of vampire bat.
And that if they feed off the wrong bat, they themselves can die?
If they feed on blood that they're not designed to eat, and they think it lacks certain nutrients, and they do become sick and die.
Okay, but now we're going to sling ourselves from South America to Europe. Would these old Europeans, whether it be in mainland Europe or the UK, would they associate vampirism with bats?
Not in the folklore.
Not in the folklore.
Yeah, like I say, it was something that was completely created by Bram Stoker.
Right, okay. So there's no records that you've come across where vampires just basically, what would the word be? Transmogrify into...
Shapeshift.
There you go. That's a better. Shapeshift into a bat. But they would shapeshift into a wolf.
Wolf, dogs, rats.
Rats.
As well, but no bats.
No bats.
No bats.
Bats off the menu, boys. That's it. There's no bats in.
That's totally unrealistic.
Totally unrealistic. Wolves, yes. Rats, definitely. Well, I suppose that's the thing, because obviously we have in the UK and in Europe we have bat species around. Of course we do, but you think that rats would be more invasive into homes, running around. Maybe people would consider rats in the medieval period as being a pest, something to shun away from, etc., etc. Wild dogs, you don't want to be bitten by a wild dog that's rabid, or definitely you don't want to have an encounter with a wolf or wolf pack. So yeah, those things would be.
Although no healthy wolf will actually go after a human being.
Mm-hmm.
It's only if they've got rabies that they're dangerous, or they've been habitualised to humans.
So should we test this out? We need to go somewhere with loads of timber wolves and.
Now we know show on the road.
Now we know show on the road with Sarah. Okay, Sarah, we're going to just leave you out here overnight with a few steaks. I mean, this is meat steaks.
Meat steaks,
not wooden steaks.
Yeah, people study wolves all the time and don't get attacked. Like I say, as long as they're not used to being around humans, so that they see humans as a threat. Being somebody who obviously studies nature, I would have thought that, again, surely that's down to, the period of the year. If you've got, it's winter or even late winter coming into spring, but you've got a very, it's that point in the year where food is very scarce, because you get that with bears as well. They've just come out of hibernation, they're skinny, they need food. But that's when they're most dangerous, because they are so hungry. And everything, even human beings, get really dangerous when they're hungry,
Very much so.
And so it would be more likely to be attacked by a wolf, surely, if that wolf or wolf pack are just literally really starving. They need food.
They will go after livestock before they go after humans. There's nothing in any historical records of a healthy wolf attacking a human being.
Oh, there you go then. There you go.
Yep.
I have a question.
Go for it. That's what it's all about.
Vampires.
That's what we're here for.
Do vampires have to be invited in?
Ah, another good myth or movie trope.
Something to discuss.
Yeah, actually inviting somebody across
The threshold.
the threshold. We've
a
spoken
house
about
or
thresholds
building.
before. It holds the thresh in. It does. There's the threshings
Okay.
on the floor.
Okay.
Threshold. There you go. So you.
Definitely in Bram Stoker, they had to be invited in.
Yep.
I'm not sure
And in
about
Fright Night.
And Lost Boys.
Lost Boy. Oh yeah, Lost Boys.
Um,
Probably loads more.
I think it varies amongst the folklore. Like I say, most vampires used to go after their family first.
Right.
For some reason, they used to go after their nearest and dearest first. Usually, some of the folk mythology, the vampires didn't have any memories when they first rose from the grave, and they slaughtered their nearest and dearest, and then get their memories back. And
Oh no!
Who writes this mythology down?
Yeah, I want to consult someone.
Yeah. Somebody was there saying, right, well, obviously the family's been slaughtered. Visitation of a vampire, yes. Uncle Dave, yeah. Uncle Jacob. That's more. Uncle Jacob died, what, a week ago? All right, okay. Obviously, he's forgotten who he was. Okay, he's come back to get his memories back. There you go. That's solved that one. Sorted. Okay.
yeah. Well, I suppose if you've just seen Remember Your Family come back from the dead, you'd be like, oh, nice to see you. You'd probably...
No, we kind of discussed that in the zombies one. Yeah, that was a bit bizarre because we had people that actually had been found alive 18 years after they supposedly died.
Yeah, that is hilarious.
It's like, how did that work?
Yeah, like I said, in some of the folklore, the vampires sort of went back to their families and just sort of carried on their normal lives and had half vampire children. And
Oh, right.
yeah, so
Okay, right. So another aspect of vampires and vampirism, is it reflected in vampire mythology that vampires have a familiar who would watch over them during the day, or is that again just another movie thing?
that's just another movie thing.
Honestly,
Honestly,
these movies.
you're destroying.
Yeah, and vampires having to sleep in the soil native to their country, so they have
that's one of those things that Bram Stoker had to put the soil in the coffins and have it transported to, was it Carfax Abbey? That was Dracula bought Carfax Abbey, didn't he? Or something like that.
Something like that.
And they all had these coffins with his soil.
Well, it was a load of crates.
Yeah, but they were filled with his
Sorry,
soil.
I'm just going on my
Okay.
movie ideas.
He's sleeping.
It's definitely crates in the book as well.
Crates. He's sleeping in his crates of soil. There you go.
But which one?
Which one? Which crate? Exactly.
Actually, in the book, Dracula isn't staked. He's killed with a knife and beheaded.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's. I'm gonna. We'll come on to how to kill vampires a bit later because that's something we want. We need.
We
to
definitely
know.
want to discuss that.
We need to know about that as well. One question, and it sort of came up with Frankenstein when we were talking about zombies. But when you talk about vampires, zombies are supposedly the living dead. But are vampires the living dead, or are they alive? I mean, we've kind of discussed spirit vampires, so I'm assuming dead. But when you get,
But also alive.
but then you said they've come back and carried on with their lives and had half vampire babies. So if you've got a corporeal vampire in full form, are they dead or are they living? How does it work?
Certainly, some of the folklore thought it was demon possession.
Okay.
Um,
I mean, is a vampire actually a demon from the depths of hell
It's possessing
that's
a body.
possessing a person? Or
like I say, it varies between the folklore. Some thought it was demon possession. Others that they came back as ghosts, like I said, and then sort of once they'd drunk enough blood, they then took on a sort of corporeal form. Then you've got like the succubi, which sort of suck on
energy.
life energy out of people. So yeah, there's some sort of different
You would have thought that the drinking of blood would. I mean, obviously, again, going to movies and books, it's the two puncture wounds. I mean, are there no kind of signs of vampirism that you could say this person has had their blood sucked?
No. As
I was just wondering because the movies they always go for the neck,
Yeah.
but there's other things. It could be arm, leg, whatever. No.
No.
So just to clarify, vampires are also ghosts, demons, and kind of ish zombies.
Yes. Kind of ish zombies, which can change shape.
Into wolves.
So which leads me on to say, okay, so there's these vampires around and about, haunting the place. How would you protect yourself from those vampires?
Certainly in the folklore, if you thought there was a vampire about, one of the checks to see which grave the vampire was buried in is you'd lead a white horse through the graveyard, and it would refuse to step on the vampire's grave. You can go, ha, vampire's hiding there, dig him up, put a stake through his heart, chop his head off. Done.
Right. I heard a similar thing with witches, that if you suspect somebody of being a witch, and you follow them and they leave a footprint anywhere, if you put an iron nail hammer it into the footprint, then they will start to limp if they're a witch, and it's a sure way of discovering that person's a witch.
Interesting thing. So, in a film called Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter,
yes, I know it well.
To see if there's a vampire around, they bury a toad in a box, and then they dig it up the morning after, and if it's alive or dead, that determines whether or not there's a vampire around.
So if it's dead, is it a vampire, or if it's still alive, or is it a dead one they bury?
I think it's alive.
Right,
I really need to watch this film again.
Okay. Have you come across anything in the mythology to do with toads?
No.
No. Okay.
Honestly,
what
the movies are lying to us.
The movies are lying to us terribly. Okay. So, I mean, what about hanging up bundles of garlic and rubbing them around your windowsill and all these sorts of things that you hear?
Like I say, garlic was supposed to have protective properties for diseases and things, so I can see why that would probably keep vampires away.
We've talked, obviously, you've mentioned about staking the bodies.
Yeah.
So was that to stake them through the heart?
Yeah.
And were there any specific choices of wood to do that?
Hawthorn was the favourite.
Hawthorn.
Again, that's got protective properties, which is one of the reasons you find it in hedgerows a lot. Cause,
boundary.
Yeah, protecting the boundary, yeah.
Interesting, because I know there's a film that involves Hawthorn killing a vampire.
This is with Christopher Lee, isn't it?
It is.
Okay.
Satanic Rites of Dracula.
Yeah, and one of the other ones, you mentioned Running Water earlier. And yes, poor old Dracula ends up going under the ice.
That's Dracula, Prince of Darkness.
Yeah, that's the running water again.
So another stake one, staked with iron.
So iron, is that a thing, Sarah? Because I think iron does come up an awful lot in folklore,
but
to ward off.
It's got to stay there.
Yeah.
If you take the iron out, it'll come back to life.
Yeah. So there is a lot to do with warding off witches, demons, etc. with iron.
I certainly know because there's actually two books about Dracula. You've got Bram Stoker's Dracula, and then you've got another one. I can't remember who was originally supposed to have written it, but it's Bram Stoker writing under his friend's name, and it's called The Guest of Dracula.
Right.
And he goes into an empty village, which the coach driver was like, don't go there. It's coming up for sunset. You really don't want to be in the village.
You don't want to be going there, sir.
No,
nobody goes there after sunset.
And he finds a sarcophagus with a great big iron stake driven through it, because obviously the person in the coffin was thought to be a vampire. So
he didn't pull it out, did he?
No.
Oh, that's all right. Well, you had me worried then.
Nice happy ending to that then.
Yes, there were wolves in
There
that
were
one.
wolves.
It was all a ruse.
But the
I
the
love
wolf
the way
actually
Sarah's
saved the
face
guy.
lights
I
up.
like wolves.
I know, we know. She's listeners. She's standing here with wolves all over her chest because she's got a wolf T-shirt and a wolf fetish. I'm going to have to say, she loves wolves.
Good grief.
I much prefer wolves and werewolves over vampires.
Well, you'll have to
so-
save that for the werewolf one, won't
Yes.
you?
So I'm just checking my notes about
Yeah,
running
check your
water.
notes. That's fine. Yeah, we want to know about running water.
Yes. In Dracula, which mimics the folklore, vampires could only cross running water at sunrise and sunset. At turning tide.
Turning tide.
Yeah,
How do
so
they know that?
high tide and low tide.
So is this specifically if they are like sort of like bricks and vampires? Sort of, they live in Skegness or something. You know? But if you're inland, would you know? It's got to be a tidal river.
I don't think it needs to be tidal. Certainly, people were thought to die at sort of either dawn or dusk, and also at the change of the tide.
Right.
So I think it sort of ties into that belief.
Right, their passing of their spirit.
Could
Yes.
they go over bridges?
Could they use a bridge?
Yeah. This is a very valid concern.
Technically, that would still be going over the running water, wouldn't it?
Interesting.
Or can they actually walk on the running water
Yeah.
or float across the running water?
Certainly in the Dracula books as well, Dracula wasn't affected. You know, he could go out in daylight, but he couldn't change shape. He could only change shape at sunrise or sunset, and then whatever shape he was in, he was stuck in that for the duration.
Right.
So,
Which is kind of reminds me of the Norse folklore of when you have people skin changers in Norse mythology. That a lot of the time that they rather than just transforming into an animal, they'd have cloaks or skins and things, you know.
Yes.
And if
They're
that,
kind of like the berserkers.
yeah, like the berserkers, I think there's 3 ladies. Literally, I'm just pulling this out of my memory. I think there's 3 young girls who had coats of swan feathers, and they flew as swans, and they landed at a lake, took their cloaks off, but then a villager saw them and stole the cloaks, and then they were trapped in human form after that.
I believe it's Freya that had a cloak of hawk feathers that
Yes,
used to.
Loki stole it, didn't he?
Yeah. There's lots of shape shifting.
Yeah.
Always
but-
check where you leave your coat.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what suddenly sprung to my mind when you mentioned it, because you suddenly then have that issue of being stuck in a certain form if you lose that, which is very interesting. Yes.
Back onto water,
Yes.
holy water.
Holy water, good point. Holy water, I've forgotten all about holy water. So if you've got,
Ordained water.
yeah,
I think that's more along the lines of vampires are bodies possessed by demons with the whole holy objects and the holy water.
well, that would bring. So that's what kind of brings it up with me, Sarah, when it comes to perhaps other cultures that may have vampirism in them. Are vampires solely affected by Christianity in that instance?
That's
Or-
you bring up crucifixes and stuff.
Yeah,
aren't you?
because by the power of Christ I compel thee and all this, or is it is
Is it just belief?
or is it belief?
I believe it's certainly in the Dresden Files. It's belief.
Because
Completely swapping from folklore to modern books. Yes, I think there's a bit in there where Dresden was saying, against vampires, there's nothing sadder than watching a non-believer waving a cross at a vampire.
now I do have an example of this.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, you've actually met a vampire?
No, I've seen a film.
No, well, we're meant to be vampires from what sense anyway.
Okay, I was watching a documentary.
Oh yes, all vampires.
Legend of the 7 Golden Vampires.
I know that with don't tell me, Peter Cushing.
Yes.
That's it.
It was kind of like a hammer horror
When-
martial arts crossover.
Where Van Helsing goes to China, or is it Japan? It's China, isn't it?
Yes, I think so.
China.
Yeah.
Chinese vampires.
Yes. And he explains about this that it's not specifically a cross, it's the power of belief. Because they say crosses won't work here because
They're Chinese vampires.
they're Chinese vampires. You have to use a little Buddha.
A little Buddha. Right. Okay. Well, there you go.
Although if it's to do with belief, if you still believe in your cross, surely it'd still work.
But not if the vampire doesn't know what it is. I suppose the thing is, the symbol that they are being affronted with There's got to be something that would
Strike
fear into them, but it would need the person behind it to have the belief in that item. Perhaps. I don't know. Oh, this is throwing a lot up in the air. This discussion. So, Sarah, why do you think so many people are attracted to the idea of vampires when subjects like cannibalism are so offensive? In human, we would say, oh, cannibalism, that's terrible. But people have become very attracted to the idea of vampires and drinking blood. Isn't it because I think consuming of human blood is kind of like, when you boil it down, it is a form of cannibalism. But vampires are seen by many these days to be kind of a more sexy and seductive creature of the night, if you like.
Yeah.
So why do you think vampires over other creatures, if you want horror creatures, have ended up having that kind of general appeal to people?
I think it's partly to do with sort of the development of like romance, sort of novels and things.
Mills and Boon.
Well, so the gothic horror sort of then sort of gave way to sort of gothic romances.
Mm-hmm.
So your vampires moved from your gothic horror into your gothic romance.
Mm-hmm. We always kind of see, it's repeated again and again and again. I mean, obviously with vampires, you kind of, in the early vampire movies, the vampire would have that kind of mesmerising stare which would hypnotise the young ladies, etc., etc. And then as we come forward with this kind of trope, vampires and vampirism has become a very kind of sexy thing, with the vampires being a sexy creature. I mean, I don't know what year Interview with the Vampire came out, but that was with Tom Cruise and what's his name? Brad Pitt, that's it, And of course, lots of ladies are like, they're really vampires. We love vampires, So I wonder what it is about vampires that have kind of, people don't necessarily see them as being evil creatures. Like, you don't want to really necessarily have a romance with a zombie, do you?
No.
Or a troll. But vampires, wow, they're all sexy and seductive, even though they're like 500 years old.
Or older.
Yeah, I think sort of the sexiness comes from sort of the more succubus side of things, which were thought, they were thought to seduce people while they were sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
So I imagine sort of some of that's been carried over into the modern vampirism.
Right. So it's really the TV and film studios have moulded it into that kind of
Honestly.
thing. Apart from sparkly vampires.
Twilight.
No.
Steaks.
Come on, you can't say you like the werewolves in Twilight. She's laughing.
Yeah, I don't like the Twilight books at all.
Oh.
Apologies to anybody who's a fan, but
apologies to the author as well. Sparkly vampires, yes. So anyway, vampires. But they have become this kind of sexy thing.
Yes. Well, again, that's probably due to Hollywood, because sex sells. So, back in the day, sort of the actors were sort of more sort of normal looking, and they're getting produced.
Bela Lugosi.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you go back to probably, as you said, you mentioned Christopher Lee playing Dracula.
Yeah.
I mean, even through his progressive movies, they got quite kind of that sexy vampire.
Yeah, they got introduced.
Well. Yeah. But it's strange how this particular creature, if you want to refer to a vampire as this particular horror genre, has progressed into that area.
Yeah.
But it's all about basically, drinking blood and being very cannibalistic, if you like, in a way, and controlling people.
Well,
is that
bringing up the question: is a vampire still a human, or is a vampire something else and not a human?
Right, so you're going back to is a vampire. Is a resurrected form that looks like a human actually the form of a human that's been taken over by a demonic spirit? Is that what you're saying?
Does it still count as being a human, or is it just a vampire?
Right, so you're saying a vampire is a different entity to the human form?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
But is it? That's what I'm trying to bring up.
I don't know. What do you think, Sarah?
Certainly with modern books, I think it's sort of more sort of they lean toward more sort of the sort of demonic side.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly the few I read anyway. Like I say, not big a fan of vampires.
You're writing a book about vampires. You're writing a book to put it all right, aren't you?
Yeah.
I am basing it more on the folklore, but like I say, I much prefer werewolves.
Well, we'll let you loose on the next podcast on that one. Let's stick with the vampires.
Yes,
as we go.
yes,
Vampires.
yes.
All right.
Try not to get
Another
distracted.
question.
Yep.
We haven't brought it up yet. Silver. How does that affect vampires?
Yeah, because you think I think I've come across movie tropes which
Some films, silver affects vampires.
in other ones,
In other films, no,
not
it
at
doesn't.
all.
I can't find anything at all in the folklore about vampires and silver.
Honestly,
There's
those
nothing
films.
in it at all.
Okay, so we've been talking about the origins of vampirism, the mythology of vampirism, and obviously we've dipped in and out of the movie and TV genre books of vampires. But are there any, recorded incidents where people actually do believe that vampires exist? And I'm talking about in modern day, because you do, just as much as people these days might go and have sightings of Bigfoot or such like, or what about vampires?
I know there is a disease. I can't remember the name of it. But it does mimic a lot of the symptoms of vampirism.
What, somebody would hide from the sunlight? That's just being ginger.
I think it does cause sort of photosensitivity.
It's like vitamin D deficiency or something.
My Wi-Fi doesn't work here. I was actually looking it up.
That doesn't work. Damn, the Wi-Fi's out.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a very rare blood condition that I think they struggle to produce their own sort of red blood cells.
Or do you think that perhaps there are cases where normal human beings, actually believe that they are vampires?
It would be kind of creepy to think about.
Well, I'm just thinking because obviously you get in Bram Stoker's Dracula, you have who's his familiar in that? I'm just trying to think of the character's name.
Renfield?
Yes, Renfield, who ends up in the a lunatic asylum.
I can tell
He
you
was
the
already in
Hammer
the
horror
lunatic
version.
He was. Oh, there you
Asylum in the
go.
book.
He was in the. It's been years since I've actually read the book. So the trouble is, your mind gets full up of all the movie stuff.
Scars of Dracula. It's Patrick Troughton playing Clove.
Oh yes, I remember that, with a very good realistic bat in it as well.
We saw that at the cinema.
We
didn't
did. We saw that in the cinema. And
Special
apart
screening.
from us, everybody else laughed. I was like,
Oh,
don't
that's
laugh
actually
at the
really
bat.
good.
Yeah, don't laugh
It got
at
me
the
into ham horror films.
Yeah, it was a really good movie. But anyway, so but what I'm thinking is it's kind of like that's a human who is assuming if he keeps eating insects and things, it's gonna and eating and consuming blood, that they are therefore going to have special powers, become immortal. Do you think that gets into the psyche of some people?
Certainly there's a growing gothic movement of people being vampires and drinking each other's blood.
Isn't that kind of sounds almost sort of sadomasochistic in a way?
Possibly. I don't know a lot about it. I
Yeah.
just concentrated on the folklore.
Now she's glad her Wi-Fi doesn't work because she can't Google it and then have that on her
Yeah,
history.
sorry, we're not part of a cult like that.
No. I was just wondering because again, you can see that going with the whole image of vampirism and vampires, which I can't see that anybody else is going to have a zombie club. You know what I mean? Because as you say, people do love to dress up in gothic clothes and to dress as things. And you see loads of people that put the old false fangs in and
Dark steampunk.
yeah, dark steampunk. Yeah, they go off to Whitby up at the Whitby goth weekend or whatever they have there, which I've been to once, which was really great seeing everybody dressed up there. But of course, that is associated with Dracula because of the ruins of.
I think they're having like a big celebration up there this year.
Are they?
They have
Because
every year.
they've got the ruins of the abbey up on the cliff top, which is supposedly where doesn't Dracula, the boat, the ship come in at Whitby, and then he escapes. He's seen running up the hill to the Abbey. So that's probably why they go there. But again, the whole concept of vampirism, Gothic, has become very, very popular and very sexy, away from the whole concept of it being a creature or an evil spirit that actually is very dark, malevolent, and dangerous. It's just interesting to discuss why that should
because we've got so many different types of creatures. Something had to take that slot, didn't it?
something had to have the sexy slot, did it?
Yeah.
Suave dressed Brad Pitt, in his clothes.
Default sexy monster.
Sexy monster. We need a sexy monster.
Yeah, there's plenty of werewolf romances.
Well, we're going to save that one.
Spoilers.
Yeah, we want to know about that.
It's one thing that drives me mad. You can't find a decent story with werewolves in that isn't a romance. And I hate romances.
Right, well, we're going to have to bring that one up in our next
podcast,
the follow-on for the Halloween season. So far, what have we found out about vampires? We found out that, they can, in mythology, change form.
Mm-hmm.
They do drink blood. They can suck your life energy as a succubus. That you do need to stake them, behead them,
burn them.
There was
Can't go over running
garlic
water.
stuffed in their mouths.
Yep, garlic.
Can't go over running water when it's tidal.
Silver doesn't really work.
Not sure about the iron.
Yeah.
Okay. What other interesting facts can you tell us about vampires? Hit us with it, Sarah. Go on.
Not really, but
Yeah. You must have some factoids. Interesting factoids on vampirism.
Oh, that was another one.
Oh, please.
It was thought that if you dreamt about a dead person, you could bring them back as a vampire. So anyone that went to see an execution used to have special rites done over them afterwards to make sure they didn't dream of the dead person.
now would this be specifically dead people, or could it be like Pet Cemetery where you bring a cat back to life?
Zombie cat.
That's
vampire cat.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. That's a money making scheme, surely. I mean, yeah, you've gone to I suppose if you've gone to an execution, that's an execution. But if you're in a battlefield and you see people dying around you and you're having post-traumatic stress syndrome and you're thinking about
That's where all the
dead
vampires
people,
come from.
But it's like, no, we'll get them into the town square. There's only 4 ways in. We'll make sure when they come out, they've got to give us a groat and get blessed on the way out. Stop him bringing vampires back. No, that's an interesting fact. So where did that spring up? Is that a kind of a European mythology or?
Yeah, I believe it is European. And other interesting fact: the Greek word for vampire and werewolf is the same.
Right. So
there is.
We are kind of with Greece. We are kind of talking European, aren't we? I mean, we're on the borders there, heading to the east. So obviously, you're saying now the Greeks obviously must have had a familiar idea of vampirism then.
Yeah, there's a lot of trading between various European countries, so it's not hard to imagine that stories got.
Well, vampires
carried.
Would vampires have been around in, say, Norse mythology? Because I know, and we will discuss this in the forthcoming werewolf one, but obviously werewolves, were-creatures were part of Norse mythology. So the reason I bring this up, if vampires were also in that mythology, we know for a fact that Vikings traded all the way across and were at places like Constantinople, so those kind of interactions and storytelling would have...
I'm not sure if there's exactly vampires, but I do have a memory. I think it was Norse mythology. Somebody wanted to speak to a dead ancestor about something, and they spilt blood on the grave.
Right.
So I can sort of.
The blood is kind of.
Blood is a common theme.
Blood, giving blood to commune with the deceased.
Yeah.
I mean, in the films, that's pretty much all the ways they always bring back Dracula.
He actually gets some blood accidentally splashed on his ashes.
Yep. Dracula, Prince of Darkness, Scars of Dracula.
Which one was the one with Johnny Alucard where they were drinking his blood?
Dracula AD.
That was Dracula AD, and they had a bottle of Dracula's blood, didn't they?
Or there was one I think it was Taste the Blood of Dracula, funnily
Or
enough.
maybe, was that the one I'm
Was
thinking of?
the one where the guy has a vial of Dracula's blood,
Yep.
drinks it, and becomes Dracula.
Right.
He kind of gets possessed by him in that.
Okay.
That's interesting, because that kind of
that's a possession.
explores that idea, doesn't it?
So, like, a demon is bound to the blood, and then because the blood has been consumed, the demon then
Takes.
be able to possess the person.
I'm going to have to watch
Interesting.
that film again.
Interesting. Right, so, any more facts and figures you can give us on vampires?
No, not really. Just to say that there is a lot of carryover between werewolf, zombies, and vampires. Even saying that witches as well.
Well, I would have thought with most mythological creatures, you are going to get them crossing over at many different junctures, aren't you?
No, well, that's the thing, because if you remember our Hertfordshire Folklore podcast, we had a lot of crossovers within the myths and legends in that.
Yeah.
And we'd picked random stories.
Yes, but in that one, we had quite a lot that came up about firing of arrows to end up in a grave, and also there was a lot that was reflective of the legend of Robin Hood in stories in that
Very
one.
much so.
Interesting. So that leads us on to our final little segment on this particular podcast about vampires and vampirism and succubuses. Say it again.
Succubi.
Say it again.
Succubus is the singular, succubi is plural.
Succubi.
Succubi.
Right. I identify as a succubi. No, I can't. That's two people. Okay. Right. Anyway, let's crack on. So we've got to that point in our podcast, Sarah. I think you might have been subjected to this once before. It's our 6 quickfire questions.
Okay.
You forgot about this, didn't you?
I had.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. So, are you prepared?
I better be, because I can't get out past Zak.
He's
I'm trapped.
He's blocking the doorway. He's protecting the threshold.
There's a vampiric look in his eye.
I can't escape, so you might as well ask me questions.
Right, let's go for it. Right, question number 1. What is your favourite vampire character from film, TV or books?
I must admit, I know it's a children's film, I did like the Listless Vampire, just because there's vampire cows in it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the farmer comes out
I
and
know what you're talking about.
eventually the entire herd's hanging
You've
up
got
in
to
the
tell
barn.
me about this,
Yeah,
because
there's
I've
no
never
vampire,
seen it.
The vampires, rather than feeding on human, feed on the local cattle.
Oh, right.
And they do little sort of segments where the farmer comes out and he's counting his cows and there's one missing. And he goes to the barn and it's hung up from the rafters with fangs and glowing red eyes.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, the Littlest Vampire. Question number 2. Would you like to be a vampire?
No.
Oh, that's a quick answer. That one.
Werewolves every time.
Okay. Ah, damn, I'm going to ask her the same question on that one. She's already preempted it. Right, okay, question number 3. Do you think vampires actually exist?
No.
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 Question 4. In your opinion, what's the best part of being a vampire if you had to be one?
Probably the immortality. There's just so much to learn.
Yeah.
To
I
have eternity to just learn everything or whatever you fancy.
I could go with that. Yeah, definitely the immortality side of being a vampire
Yeah, I could go
would
with
really
that.
appeal to me, because I lust for life. I love life. And although technically would you be the undead? I don't know. But to be able to continue experience everything.
Well, saying that, I've heard that through some films, werewolves are also immortal.
Are they? Oh, we'll discuss that one then. And Zak would love being a vampire because he hates getting up in the morning.
Yep.
you
I
see?
must admit, I don't do days.
Yeah. Oh,
Maybe you are a vampire.
yeah. Maybe we're all vampires and we're just not telling the listeners. Shh, don't count this.
We didn't talk about reflections.
Ah, yeah. Okay, we'll come back to that just as an add-on
Yeah.
after my 6 questions, all right?
There you go.
Okay, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay, question number 5. What's your favourite vampire movie or TV show? Oh, she's thinking on this one.
Yeah, because I don't read a lot of vampire stuff.
This is the vampire specialist, and she doesn't like vampires. That's
It's
crazy.
got to be Dracula because it's the original. So.
Dracula.
Which
The original
which one?
by
Okay.
Bram Stoker.
Right,
Okay.
out of the book, Dracula.
Yes.
What's your favourite? Just as an add-on, what's your favourite kind of, in that case, depiction of Bram Stoker's Dracula? You got a lot to choose from.
I know.
Lots of films called Dracula.
Lots of films called Dracula. Lots of actors who've played Dracula, both TV and films.
I must admit, I don't.
There's
I haven't
there's
seen.
none-
I haven't seen a lot.
They're not sticking in your head then.
No. Huh?
Well, it's not the guy from Blade 3.
No, not the guy from Blade 3. That's Disco Drac. Yeah, have you ever seen Blade 3?
It's Drake.
Drake, yeah, he's got his open chest shirt with a big medallion, and he actually calls himself Drake, and he looks like John Travolta as a vampire. You can't take it seriously, can you? I am Drake. Okay,
Well, my favourite depiction of Dracula, Christopher Lee.
Christopher Lee.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I like Christopher Lee as Dracula.
He's great in everything.
Yeah, he's great and an absolutely fantastic actor. So yeah, I'll go with that. You know, but there have been some good. There's that TV show that recently came out.
Yeah, he was good as Dracula.
What's that called? Dracula.
That was called
It
Dracula.
was Dracula. So it was a recent TV show. It was probably 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was before COVID.
It was 3 episodes.
It was 3 episodes. The first 2 episodes absolutely rocked, and he really did portray Dracula really well.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Third
third
episode.
episode, waste of time. Don't watch it. Okay, it wasn't his fault. Anyway, question 6. Dracula, I think I know the answer to this. Dracula or Nosferatu?
What? As the names? Or...
Your choice.
I must admit, Nosferatu just sounds cool.
Okay, so
There you go then.
Nosferatu takes it at the end.
Yeah, I mean, if you got a choice, vampire or Nosferatu, come on, Nosferatu.
Nosferatu. Interesting. You got an interesting thing about some factoids about the film Nosferatu, haven't you?
I've seen Nosferatu.
Yeah, but wasn't it about that the studios tried to get it banned or something?
Oh, yeah, apparently, because it was like they had a big row over the rights between the Universal Studios Dracula and Nosferatu. They kind of came out at the same kind of point, and they got really kind of.
In fact, if I
they thought it was a
recall,
rip-off.
if I recall that because of the legal wranglings, every single copy of Nosferatu the movie was destroyed, apart from one that survived, and that's the one we all get to see now.
Wow.
Because just by luck, one copy survived.
Actually, I remember reading that there was a Dracula movie based on the Bram Stoker book that came out 2 years before Nosferatu, and it was Russian.
Oh, right.
So actually,
Rushferatu.
Nosferatu.
so actually, the Nosferatu, the 1922 one, isn't the
Yeah,
first
isn't the
ever
original.
Dracula movie.
Right.
Wow, that's.
I can see Zach going, I've got to find a copy now.
We've got to find a copy of that one.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many lost
Yeah,
films.
but it was, I'm sure, you can check it, if I'm wrong, the listeners can tell me, but I'm sure the Nosferatu movie that we have was taken from one and one only existing
I
copy
believe
of
you're
the film.
right on that one.
Another freaky fact about it. Apparently, that set was cursed.
Oh, it's one of those ones.
One of those ones where loads of people kind of died
Had
during the
accidents and
production.
things.
Yeah, it was very cursed.
Do you know that happens with an awful lot of movies? You know, I've heard, I know we're going a slightly off tangent, but we are talking about vampires and it's Halloween, horror movies. But yeah, you have things where they always have, like with Poltergeist, so many different things meant to happen on set with Poltergeist. And even with Wizard of Oz, there are mythologies about the Wizard of Oz that Munchkin could be seen in the background, who'd hung himself in the
right.
background and things like this.
I know the
Yeah,
Tin Man changed in that because the first actor got lead poisoning from the
Oh
makeup
no, from the
paint.
makeup.
Yeah, so they actually had to replace him with someone else.
Wow.
Oh dear. So anyway, yeah. So
Back onto Nosferatu.
back onto Nosferatu.
So they made a film called Shadow of the Vampire, starring Willem Dafoe as Nosferatu, playing Count Orlok, who is Nosferatu, as Count Orlok, who is actually a vampire, who then gets hired to star in the film Nosferatu
Right.
to explain how all the people died and went disappeared during it.
Oh, I see. I didn't know that. There
And
was-
they make out at the end that they kind of organise him being shown sunlight, and he then actually evaporates because he is actually a vampire.
Fascinating, isn't it?
I really enjoyed that film. I watched it with Jack.
So
That sounds like a cool movie.
so go back to you, Sarah. The word Nosferatu means
Plague carrier.
And in the film Nosferatu, the character was Count
Orlok.
So actually the title of the movie isn't necessarily referring to the character's name as the character with his fangs is Nosferatu. It's just basically meaning...
Well, that's a thing, isn't it? Because
he's not.
I'm sure it may have been in that, or
is he referred to as a Nosferatu?
but there is a plague of rats that suddenly appear.
Right. So
I think
he's the
because we
plague
watched
character.
about 3 different Nosferatus. We watched the original, a remake, and Shadow of the Vampire, which was kind of the one that kind of tried to explain it all.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very interesting to see each one.
Okay. Well, we'll have to look into that. So to just before we round things off, you did mention
Reflections.
reflections.
Again, I think that was a Bram Stoker creation. I haven't found anything about lack of reflections from vampires in the folklore.
Carrying a small mirror with you to flash at somebody. No, it's not going to help.
No.
Look, I can't see you, vampire. I just wanted. We got to know these things because, I mean, it could be that we've just got things mixed up with, again, gothic horror, modern day, steampunk even. But you see these people that these ancient oddities of like vampire hunting kits, like in a case, maybe even ones that from the Victorian period that have all the bits and pieces in there. And have a mirror. Do you think all these people have designed all this simply based on Bram Stoker's book?
If you've got a bit of everything, surely you're definitely covered.
Okay. Back, vampire. Oh, that's not working. Right, let's go for that one. Back. No, that was not working. Let's go for mirror. Right. No, that's not working. Okay.
It's like in the Mummy movie where he pulls out all these religious necklaces.
Oh, yes. He keeps speaking in different languages. And then eventually, you speak the language of the slaves. It's like, yes, got the right one. Good memory. Good memory.
No, we're going to have to do one about mummies now.
Yeah, we have mummies. Anyway, right, so there we have it. We've learnt loads about vampires and vampirism and the myth behind it, and that these days the myth has become sexy vampires.
Don't trust the movies.
Don't trust the movies.
That's what we've learned.
Trust Sarah. She knows.
There you go. You just need to keep Sarah in like a box or something.
Yeah.
Deploy
Vampire
the specialist.
Sarah. That's it. You think I've got a cross in here? No, I've got my own deployable Sarah. Attack! Wah! Off she goes. No good against werewolves because she'll just go and cuddle them. And with that,
if you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe to this channel and comment below any suggestions of topics or activities you'd like to listen to in future episodes. You can find the Now We Know Show podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music and Apple Podcasts. Check out the Zak Wylde Productions social media pages on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, or visit the Zak Wylde Productions website at www.zakwyldeproductions.com. Please get in contact, we'd love to find out how you're listening to us. So get in touch in the comments and don't forget to check out Zak Wylde Productions on Patreon to become an official ZWP patron today.
it is a counting Dracula goodbye from Buzz.
And that's a big succubus from Zak.
Suck goodbye. I like that one.
Yeah.
That's well done.
I'll tell you what, I'll leave you a joke.
Okay, leave us with the
Have
joke.
you heard the one about the nuns that are driving along the road, vampire leaps on the hood of the car?
Okay, no.
No. Anyway, the nun driving puts the windscreen wipers on, vampire still clinging to the car. She goes, turns to the nun next to her, and she's like, what do I do? And the other nun goes, show me your cross. So she winds down the window, sticks her head out and shouts, will you get off the bloody car?
And that's a perfect ending to yet another podcast from the Now We Know Show.
It's been fun, that's your words.
Brilliant one, Sarah. Love you coming in.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Whoa. Now we know show.
Is that more ghosty?
Well, I don't know. I'm trying to sound like Dracula.
Like a Dracula.
Can you sound like a vampire, Sarah?
No. No, I'm not even going to try.